right, good morning. Welcome to our continuing coverage of the August protest from Abuja. Well, quite a lot has been going on, but up north, several have said usually conservative, but this time it's different because you saw lots of people who were on the streets getting their voices heard in all shapes and form. Kano has taken a hit. Kaduna also saw that. Bauchi not left out. Borno as well, you know the scenario there also playing itself up. But good morning, everybody. I'm Chamberlain Uso.
Good morning, I'm Maokpe Ogunyusuf. Well, we had thought that day 2 was going to be the aftermath of day 1, but no, day 2 took its own place as day 2 of the protest.
Yep.
The protesters had said it was going to be a 10-day protest. Ostensibly, this is what's supposed to be day 3. It's not clear if, given the fact that quite a number of economic activities have begun or have resumed in quite a number of cities, and some cities did not even join the protest at all. It's unclear what's going to happen today, but this is where we are. Whatever happens, however it happens, we're here to tell you all about it. At least that way, if you intend to join the protest, it will be your prerogative. If you intend to go about your business, it will be your prerogative. I know that, you know, from the angle of security agents and also some of the authorities, it has been about the fact that people have a right to protest, but people also have a right to go about their duties if they do not wish to protest. So this is where we are, telling you all about it. Day 3, quite a number of developments have already started already. We can tell you very certainly that the governor of Borno State, Professor Babagana Zulum, has lifted the curfew, the 24-hour curfew imposed on Maiduguri in the aftermath of the violent turn of protest in that particular city.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, you know, when you saw that the rowdy nature of how the protest turned out in Borno State, of course, many were always going to be concerned. And the bomb attack there, 19 people were killed. And you know, the thing about these figures is it changes. So when you try to confirm certain things and staying on programs like this, you always have to be constantly checking. So as at this morning, the narrative coming through from the Borno State governor did give that figure that yes, the bomb attack killed 19 people, which all of this occurred. So the governor did say that he made that announcement in a statewide broadcast, which was made available to us. And he said the government had to impose that curfew to avoid Boko Haram elements taking advantage and wreak havoc in the state. He said the protest was hijacked by hoodlums who made several attempts to destroy public infrastructure, but for the timely intervention of the military and other security agencies. He goes on to say, while charging the residents to go about their normal activities, the governor said security of the state will not be compromised for any reason. So the news coming through this morning is that in Borno State, the curfew has been lifted. He doesn't want, terrorists, the Boko Haram elements to take advantage. So now that the curfew has been lifted, we do not know how this will play out. So that's the thing about all of these scenarios. It just, it plays out how it plays out, and you just follow it all as it unfolds. So, but for Yobe, remember, it was 3 local governments that they declared curfew for. There wasn't any curfew in Kaduna, and then you also had curfew in Kano. So we'll be checking with those states to see how are they approaching it. Yesterday, when we had the gentleman joining us, he equally thought it's kind of tricky considering the political history. In fact, recent political situation there wherein the emirs, you know what's going on in the Emirate Council, the governorships, you know how the tussle is going through, even though, yes, the current governor subsists by reason of the court judgments and the election, affirming his victory at the polls. But the other camps are also there. And then Kano was where we also had that unfortunate incident that the NCC facility was touched, looted. So how all of this play out, we do not know. But we also do know that it usually is a slow build-up. Last 2 days, it's been a slow build-up. But today is today, and we'll watch and see.
Indeed, Chamberlain, I think we can bring a report of the summary of events that happened in the northern region of Nigeria, keeping in mind the fact that there are updates. For instance, the fact that The governor of Borno State has now lifted the 24-hour curfew in Maiduguri, but this was how it went down in the northern states yesterday.
It's day 2 of the End Bad Governance protest. And following the fracas that trailed the first day of the protest, security is beefed up across the states in the north to forestall another breakdown of law and order. Some state governors also addressed protesters in the states in a bid to reduce the tension.
This is not an NLC demand for increment of salary. They are protesting for hunger. They are protesting against poverty, which is as a result of the bad policy by this administration.
There is problem, there is hunger.
Yes, sir. Of course, sir. That's the fact. That's the fact we are here.
It is my responsibility,
Yes, sir.
as your brother,
Yes, sir.
as your governor,
Yes, sir.
to make sure that the best come back to you.
Thank you, sir.
However, in Plateau State, a former Minister of Sports, Solomon Dalong, urged President Bwala to consider the demands put forward by the protesters.
The main purpose of this protest is to praise the president to reverse some of his economic policies that has brought so much intolerance to the people. And I appeal to the people of Plateau to conduct themselves peacefully, because our own challenges are so peculiar. And I thank them for demonstrating love, because yesterday, when it was time to pray, the Muslims were given water here, they perform ablution, and they say their prayers to God while we give them protection.
Meanwhile, the chairman of Kefi local government area of Nasarawa State has imposed a curfew in the community, citing security concerns arising from the hijack of the protest by miscreants on day 1. Calm returns to Gombe as the governor goes around town to inspect the situation.
Yes, there is a setback because for 2 days people have not gone to business. But for sure, Gombe is always ready to cooperate with us as a government and will pursue and support whatever in order to see that these people go back to their businesses and nobody comes and cause any mayhem to them. There is going to be peace, a continuous peace for them to pursue their businesses. There is going to be peace for government to run its business, and people will move forward the way we used to do, inshallah.
His Kwara State counterpart appreciates the people for heeding the call not to protest.
We engage properly all the stakeholders, religious bodies, and they understood and they're patient. But I can assure them that the president is working, and very soon you start seeing changes. There are things like the students' loans, all sorts of various interventions are going on to deepen the relief. So I just urge patience, and peace will be done. Those that are angry, yes, we feel your anger, but the most important thing is to say, this is a listening government, we've heard, and the right things will be done.
In the meantime, the police in Sokoto State says 81 suspected hoodlums have been arrested in connection with the violence and vandalism that followed the nationwide protest against hunger in the states.
So there you go. That's some wrap-up of how it played out in the north as of yet. But several appeals, as you also have heard, have rung out from different quarters, different officials, to also weighing in, asking, sheath your swords, and that, well, your voices have been heard. Here's one of such voices, the Minister of State for Labour.
I am so concerned about what happened yesterday, especially the loss of lives for our brothers and sisters who passed on at the cause of the protest. My heart goes to them. It's quite unfortunate that these things has to happen that way. I plead that we should sheath our sword and embrace peace and stop at this moment. The president has heard everybody loud and clear. President is somebody who is a Nigerian, who understands the politics of this country, who understands the yearning and aspiration of the people of this country.
All right, so we've got here in our studios Caller Ologbondiyan, former National Publicity Secretary of the People's Democratic Party. Good morning, and thank you for coming on today.
Good morning, Chamberlain. Good morning, Maupe.
Well, what a scenario we've got in our hands. Yes, it's it's Saturday actually. So we're mixing it with protest day, so that just fills your head. So you're just wondering what's going to play out, how is it going to happen. But for you now, what is your impression of how all of this is playing out?
Well, when we talk about impression, I think that the youths, and I truly want to give it to the youths of this country, have passed the message effectively to President Bwala met Tinubu. And I know that there have been losses at both ends, on the side of government, on the side of the people, and collaterally on the side of Nigerians who could not go out to do their businesses and who have lost huge sums of money. But notwithstanding, I think the message needed to be passed to Mr. President, that policies are not cast in iron, and that you must continue to examine the processes. You must have a strong feedback mechanism, because these are the things that I believe that are lacking. You must have a strong feedback mechanism, and you must take that feedback mechanism very, very seriously.
Speaking about that feedback mechanism, I mean, this is not, it's almost like a recurring decimal in politics with presidents and governments versus the people. So what exactly do you think usually happens? Because don't forget too, the time that the former president, Jonathan, tried to get the subsidy out too, there was also that brick wall where some people thought, no, we don't think this should happen. And then there were questions about communication, even though, yes, we saw that they were trying to address the people. So what do you think is the missing link about always getting the messages across to the people, either rightly or wrongly?
Okay, thank you, Chamberlain. Let me also sympathize with those who lost their lives, and also pray that God grant their soul repose, and also to those who have lost their property, to sympathize with them. But having said that, we talk about communication. These things are very easy. Like I said earlier, they aren't cast in iron. But if a government or the leaders of a government appears to be arrogant, I know even from history, whether in the religious books or whether in the lives of the people, from history, leaders often come up that appears to be arrogant, and they don't care what the people feel or how the people think. When you have that kind of a situation, communication is difficult. I do not want to believe. And I'm personally pained. You know why, Chamberlain? In the history of Nigeria, this is the first time that we're having eminent politicians, eminent members of the political class being in government who have experiences. And I'll give you my reasons. Bwala Tinubu was a senator and governor before he became president. His wife, Mr. Tinubu, 3-term senator, the chief of staff, has been in the National Assembly, I think since 1999 or 2003. The SGF, a senator, a governor, a minister, before he became SGF. Now, where is the experience? Because that's my own worry. Where is the experience?
But isn't this like the changing nature of politics? The changing, because if you look at what has happened here, if you look at what has happened, I mean, yes, our politics, some people say our politics hasn't evolved, but the country which they lead, the people whom they lead have evolved as a result of many factors, as a result of the development of technology, as a result of you know, the globalization of the world, the fact that, you know, whatever is happening in whatever part of the world, you know, is felt in another part of the world almost immediately, can be seen. Here we have groups of young people under known banner of any sort, no known agglomeration, who have said, look, we want to protest. And that's because we have had days of hardship. I mean, we've had endured years of hardship as a result of fuel subsidy removal. So it does appear that there is a change in face where the experience of yesteryears might not exactly count in dealing with what we currently have evolving today. Do you agree with that?
I don't totally agree with you, Markwe, with that, Markwe. You know why? The protest didn't just happen. It didn't just occur. There's nobody that is in Nigeria, and I can even say globally, like rightly pointed out, that wasn't aware that there were plots or moves to engage the government via protest. But you know what the government did? Instead of the president coming out to address Nigerians, majority of the people involved in this are the age mate of his own children, to come and engage and speak. Even as we speak now, they were totally ignored. So that has nothing to do with whether technology is about empathy.
No, when I say, because there's anything that some people say this government at least tried to do. It's part of what yesterday I was speaking with a number of our guests. One of the guests said, look, what the government was doing is third-party engagement. So we saw quite a bit of frenzy in the run-up to this protest. Government engaging different bodies and groups, and, you know, bodies coming out to say, no, we are appeal to our members, please don't join the protest. We want to say we're not a part of the protest. So there was that level of engagement. We saw traditional rulers, we saw governors, we saw ministers, we saw all manner of people come out to appeal to Nigerians to say, don't join the protest, or let us be peaceful, or whatever it was that they were saying. So we saw all of that. However, that might have worked maybe 20 years ago. It doesn't seem to be the sort of engagement that is needed in this situation as a result of the amorphous nature of the protest. Do you agree with that?
That's why I said that the president needed to come out and speak to Nigerians, not a third-party style that you said the guests you spoke with referred to. The president himself. What stops the president from addressing the nation?
If he does,
God, that's the question.
What do you think will happen if he does?
If he does, my expectation of any address of the president today is such that will address the issues, the concerns. The main issue. What are the issues? Hunger. Okay, yes, the president said in one of the addresses, I said that, oh, okay, he has approved the opening of the borders to bring in food. These are temporary measures. How does that solve? How does that help us? Because already, let me tell you, on a large scale, given the cost of food items today, many Nigerians have returned to the farm, not minding the security threat. People are doing plantation. People are planting food in their respective homes. Then I think, instead of the government to support that model, it says that, oh, it has opened the border to bring in food. And there's so much propaganda. For instance, let me give you one. The government is saying that, oh, you can go to the market and buy rice at 50,000 or 40,000 or 50 kg of rice. Where is it? In which market? Through which government office? So there's so much propaganda rather than addressing what the issues are. So I believe, because I have also seen reports here and there where the government people who cannot even come out boldly to speak are using the social media to propagate that, the government has addressed this number of times.
Even though I saw a certain report that the government sold, I think, 50 kilogram bag of rice for 40,000 naira, but I'll double check. I didn't read it properly, but I saw it somewhere. But
no, that's what I'm saying. I say, in which market are they selling that? Is it in the supermarket close to your house? Or is it in the market close around your house? Like I have seen people buying.
There's no supermarket close to my house, actually.
Okay, maybe there's a market close to you. I have seen people buying 50 kg of rice for 40,000. You don't need such propaganda. They are needless.
So when we started
they don't address the realities.
When we started out with the Gen Zs and being part of this and playing an active role, why wasn't the opposition the face of this protest?
Well, even the opposition had not been the face of the protest when the government was already accusing leaders of the opposition that, oh, they are behind the plot, oh, they want to scuttle the administration, oh, what they lost in the election, they want to get from the back door.
Do politicians pay attention to those kind of accusations?
They see it now. Everybody reads it now. It's in public space.
No, does it stop the opposition from either making sure that, well, you can say whatever you want, but the hunger is hunger?
Well, I think everybody is acting in their private capacities. I think everybody is involved in one way or the other. Protest doesn't mean that you have to come to the streets. There's also civil disobedience. People staying in their homes and saying that we'll let the government carry on since it is not prepared to listen to what Nigerians are saying. So I think that's the circumstance in which we find ourselves.
So as things are playing out now, can we really say that we do not have politicians who are fueling this?
Whether there are politicians who are fueling it?
Can we say that is not happening?
I do not believe, and I'm saying this with every sense of responsibility, that there's any politician who's fueling. Do you need a politician to tell you that you are hungry? Do you need a politician to tell you that your purchasing power has become ridiculously low? What do you need a politician to? What is happening in Nigeria now? That any politician, look, let me even tell you, any politician that comes out to speak and doesn't know the manner of his address, the retaliation will be very severe. That's the honest truth. So politicians are even avoiding the situation. They are avoiding engagement. That's the honest truth.
All right, let's bring in Mr. Daniel Bwala. He joins us virtually this morning. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on the program today. So, Mr. Bwala, we've seen your images with the president, and you've been speaking lately as well about that. We hope you can hear us, Mr. Bwala. So, could you tell us, do you think the president or presidency is getting the message from Nigerians about this protest?
Good morning, Chamberlain, and good morning to Nigerians. I think that, let me just make a point regarding the question, pointedly. The whole idea of the protest is to get government to do something. So the emphasis is on the doing of that thing rather than on just the president coming to say, I have heard you, I will do it. Because if he says, I heard you, I will do it, but he doesn't do it, that is also a breach of trust. But you ask the question whether the government is hearing. I believe strongly in the last 2 weeks, not only has the government heard and communicated to Nigerians that the president is assiduously working towards fulfilling some of the demands of the protesters. We have seen policy direction and implementation that is that is tailored to the needs. For example, they talked about hunger. This is one fact that nobody is under illusion in Nigeria that there is extreme hunger. Nobody. Because virtually even the rich, they are affected by this element. Because if you think you can feed your family, you must have noticed that the number of people who are now approaching you seeking for food, either from home, from village, from everywhere, has increased, including religious leaders. So we are all at Edom as regarding hunger. The approach in dealing with the hunger, the president over the last 2 weeks has taken policy measures and decisions in a bid to deal with that. The Federation of Nigeria consists of not just people in the center, but people in the state and at the local level. The redistribution of the wealth of Nigeria through the increased allocation is part of the bid of government to deal with hunger at the local level, meaning that the state government with the increased allocation can as well use this money to deal with hunger in their locality as well as the local government. In addition to that, the president gives them 10 billion every month in a bid to deal with this, imminent problem confronting our people, because of crisis and insecurity, we have not had enough farm. Then you have, dry season. Thankfully, we're coming to rainy season, so in the coming months, there will be food sufficiency. The president even went beyond that and said, look, I will even import food. And a lot of people are criticizing him because the policy before now is that we don't need to import, because if we import, it will affect our local market sellers. The president also approved the release of truckloads of food to reach out to the people. And then 3 days ago, he has also approved the sale of 50 kg of rice for 40,000. All of these things are policy decisions in a bid to deal with hunger. We can debate about whether that has reached the people, like my brother, Ologbondiyan, is talking about whether it has reached the people or not. But that is a quick response by government to the demands of the people. And then you can escalate that to virtually every other demands that the protesters raise, except for a few ones that, of course, if it has to happen, it will require constitutional amendment. And there are those that are practically impossible, like the demand for the release of Nnamdi Kanu. There is a judicial process that has commenced already. The president has to wait, even if he has to give prerogative, he has to wait until there is a conviction. So in terms of whether the president or the government is responding, the government is responding directly. I think that the protest could have been so detailed to talk about the specificity, regarding whether these things that the government is saying we are doing, we are releasing, we are giving, whether it is actually reaching the people. That means the protest by now could have been so decentralized to a point where there would also be a concurrent protest in state facing the governors and a concurrent protest in state facing the local government. But because this protest does not have a defined goal, there are objectives. We need this, we need that, we need that. And that's why we said that characteristic of a well-organized protest has to be identifiable leadership, has to be identifiable objective, has to have a timeline, and has to have a deliverables. And all of these elements are not there because you have multiple groups with multiple demands, and you find it very difficult to negotiate with who. You can negotiate with A. Right.
So let me ask. I mean, part of the narrative which we've also seen out there over time, recently, as a result of all of this, is that government says, look, we are doing this, this, and that. And the people who are out there say, look, we don't see what you say you're doing. So it does then appear as though, well, whatever it is that you say you're doing is lost on the people. Shouldn't they then go back and retool and ask ourselves, why is it that they are saying they don't feel the impact of what we're doing? Implementation. Something is wrong at that point.
Definitely, when a policy involves hunger in a population of over 180 million, some people say we may have probably reached 200 million. Whatever you do as a policy direction, it will definitely be like a drop in the ocean. But the intention is important, and the process is also key. Because once the government decision is released in that direction, there will be effort on the part of the private sector to be a part of it. So, for example, if the government is dealing with hunger in terms of providing rice and the rest, and the private sector coming to it, you will discover that there will be a situation where this food will be sufficient. This issue around food, in the next, because it also coincides with, dry season, then there is also the issue of Ukraine and Russia. In the next few months, you're going to see some level of improvement in that area because there will be harvest and all of that. But specifically with respect to, you say you are doing this, we don't feel it. I think that a more organized protest should be such that they should have people who monitor implementation of government projects. I know government has a responsibility to monitor, evaluate, and the implementation of the program, they have to monitor and evaluate. But then also, if I am doing business with you, Mr. Chamberlain, and you tell me you have released the funds to me, it will be hope of me to find out from my bankers whether this money has been transferred, to find out from my bankers whether this money has been rechanneled to another direction. These are the primary things I would do. Then I'll come back to you, Chamberlain, and say, look, you claim to have transferred the money, but in actual fact, you have given instruction to your bankers that when the money leaves your account, it shouldn't come to my account, it should go to A, B, and C. I'm trying to tell you as a partner in the business that, look, I know what I'm talking about. I will not just sit down and say, because you say you have transferred, then if I have not seen it, I will then go to the street and start protesting, only to realize that the way business is run with respect to international transfer is that you have to give it 5 business days before the money hit the account. The summary of what I'm saying is that we have to be organized as the people who are protesting to look at the specificity of the implementation of program. Nigeria is not a climate that gives room for all of that. We run into emotions so easily. And I am not in any way in denial, like I said from the beginning, to set the base that there is extreme hunger in the country. We are not in that. So anybody who comes back and say, you don't know how they are feeling and the rest, you are just repeating. We all agree to that. We are talking about solution. So this is why I think, for example, Minister of Agriculture, I was the first person when the president first announced the release of food from the strategic reserve. I was the first person to say in the media, has the Minister of Agriculture communicated to the Nigerian people as to whether there was actually food in the strategic reserve? And if no, have you communicated to the president or to the Nigerian people that now warrant the need to import rice? Have you also, if you send rice to, say, Borno State or Kano or whatever state of the Federation, do you just go and dump it and go? There has to be monitoring and evaluation. You should be able to say, so number of rice, bag of rice, have been given to this state. It has been taken, the delivery was taken by so and so, and then you have people on ground who will monitor who got it. Take, for example, when these 50 kg of rice
Bwala,
to be released.
Mr. Bwala, I'm afraid I have to interrupt you because we have another guest. We also have joining this conversation Professor Osita Ogbu, who is a professor of economics at the University of Nigeria, Nsukka. He joins us via Zoom from Enugu. Good morning, Prof, and welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, this is where we are right now. Nigerians protesting, economic hardship as a result of the removal of fuel subsidy. It's taken over a year for us to see this reaction, but it has come nonetheless. From your own estimation, we've seen that, different governments have skirted around this issue, the issue of removal of subsidy, whether it be around petrol, whether it be around USD, management of our forex, as the case might be. We've seen how governments have skirted around these issues, but economists have always said, look, we need to address these issues headlong. And perhaps, what we're currently saying is the reason why they have, been a little reluctant to address it headlong. This is where we are now. What is your own assessment of the action that has been taken via policy and the consequence of what has currently happened?
Thank you very much. I will get to your question, but let me make one or two remarks concerning the protests. One is that, leadership is both substance and style, and I want people to underline this. And so, even when the intentions are right, the way and manner in which they are communicated, they are dealt with, are also important. The second point is that the presidency is an institution, and that institution needs to be managed. It's not a person, it's an institution. And so the handlers of this institution should come with skills to manage the presidency. Extremely important. Third point, the protest is actually a protest against all tiers of government. Let's be very clear about this. It's a protest against the political class. So I think it's important for us to understand what is happening. I think anybody ignoring the other tiers of government in this respect will not be doing justice to what is happening in the country. You might have good intentions, but do you have the knowledge of the means? Because that's the essence of government. The essence of good governance is that the welfare of the people is uppermost in your mind. You want to do right. But do you have the knowledge of the means of how best to do right? Extremely important. Let me get to your point on removal of subsidy and the floating of the naira. When you have a developing economy at the stage at which we are, the market is not deep. The market is shallow, underdeveloped. You cannot rely on market forces. there is a process of gradualism. For those of us who have studied China and all other countries that are reforming, there is a gradual approach to reform. And when you take macro decisions, you must be aware of micro realities. You know, the reason why economists are very reluctant to come on television to speak is that we consider what happens on television as partial analysis, and that can be quite dangerous. You have to have the whole picture before you begin to speak. Subsidy is not a bad word. Subsidy is used all over the world to address issues of affordability, address inequality, delivery of public goods and public services. So subsidy is not, anybody coming to tell you subsidy is wrong, is not correct, not at the stage at which we are. What was wrong was that the subsidy was mismanaged. So that mismanagement should have been at the center of that policy. So if you float your exchange rate or exchange, the Naira exchange to dollar to other currencies, when the market does not exist, and you are saying market forces, and there is even only maybe a single supplier to that market, you run into difficulty. The crisis we have right now is crisis of inflation. In fact, I've said we are in a supply crisis. Crisis of supply of food, crisis of supply of foreign exchange, foreign currencies, crisis of supply of employment. And there are no easy solutions. There can be certain quick fixes, but there are no easy solutions. You have to go into production, production, production. I don't know whether I've addressed that question or I should continue.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you're at least beginning to touch on that particular issue, which you have said there are no easy solutions. And it would seem that the entire picture wasn't, taken a look at before certain decisions were taken. Are you also implying that?
Yes, absolutely. You see, that's why I said there are macro realities. If you go and check the research that has been done on inflation, you will immediately see exchange rate, interest rate, petroleum prices as significant factors on inflation. And by the way, as economists, we know that inflation is the greatest enemy of the poor. The rich can actually rearrange their assets and take advantage of inflation. I'm sure you know this. Right now, there are interest rates that are paid on investments that are up to 25%. No poor person has scarce resources to be investing, especially food inflation. Inflation is not something that any government toys with because of its effect on the poor. So when we say hunger in the land is because there is food crisis. The demand has remained the same, may even have increased because our population is increasing, but the supply has not. And so we need to address these supply constraints head on and adequately. The interventions may be palliative, but they will not solve it. And I think what has been happening is that there seems to be some sense that there is business as usual. A lot of knowledge is not being brought in, even the ministries are being run, and so on. And so sometimes when people ask me, how do you fix the economy? I say, go and fix the politics first.
Well, let's quickly go to our Lagos studios. I know that our colleagues there also have guests in the studio. So over to you now, Kayode, Jeff, and Bwala.
Thank you very much, Malkwe. So many sides to the conversation. And as we continue here from our Lagos studio, let's welcome Dr. Seyi Adetayo, Dr. Seyi Adetayo, who is a retired principal staff officer, DSS and security intelligence consultant. Good morning and welcome to the program. So as we reflect on what has happened so far, it's important to also look at both sides of the conversation. We've seen protesters come out and conduct themselves in an orderly manner in Lagos, in Abuja, in Port Harcourt. But we've also seen looting in many parts of the country. And, some would say that the long-term consequences of looting are even more because, some properties that have been vandalized may take a while, more than a year or two, before, the businesses get themselves back together. But some would also say that already the economy was growing at a very slow pace. So I wonder, do the benefits of the protests outweigh the odds for you, Dr. Adetayo?
Well, the answer is no. But let me say this. I must commend all parties so far. Before this protest, we've been expecting that things is going to be, much worse than, what we're seeing today. In fact, we're expecting the worst scenario. But so far, I must commend the professionalism on the part of the law enforcement. Most importantly, Nigerian police, they've lost men. And also the protesters. If you look at the protesters, they are into different categories. They're the real protesters, those, people who are really, out there to actually show government that things are not working and they need to speak their mind. And we have those that are looking, to take the advantage of that to commit all sorts of criminalities like looting. And then we have those that are taking advantage of that, not actually coming out, but behind the scene, making money for themselves. And we have those with other ulterior motive. But that shouldn't blight, the main issue on ground. People are hungry.
Civilians as well.
Yeah.
Just to speak to the side of civilians, not just the security. Civilians have also died as well.
Sorry, I also missed that too, and quite unfortunate that people's lives were also lost in that protest. But it should have been much worse than that. But if not for the way the protesters conducted themselves in most parts of Nigeria, and also the professionalism on the part of the law enforcement, we've seen places where even commissioner of police out there were out there addressing the protesters. We've seen policemen dancing with them, singing. I saw a video where they were dancing to Food No Day, Water No Day. Policemen were dancing, and that is the kind of Nigeria that we're looking forward to. Shows that we've matured as a nation. To me, I would say congratulations to all Nigerians. We've been able to show that in spite of how hungry and angry we are, we can still do things that still remember that we have a country to come back to at the end of the day. I've seen protests in the United States. If you look at Black Lives Matter, it was worse. People died. We've seen police showing extreme brutality, against protesters. And we've not seen that here. So which means that from NSAS protests, we've learned a lot. And a lot of community engagement actually went into this. I must commend the governors. I must commend traditional rulers, community all stakeholders. One thing I've seen is that nobody is arguing that, people are not hungry. Where everyone is saying, yes, we know, but at the end of the day, we still have a country that we must come back to. In spite of all this, the whole objective is for us to be able to have a progressive and prosperous nation as a whole, and that cannot be achieved in an environment of anarchy and chaos.
Right. I just wanted to quickly walk through some of the demands, because there's the heart of the matter, and then there are other issues that we can pick around, the conduct of security, whether or not government is speaking and all of that. But at the heart of this, we have the demands of the protesters. Now, it depends on who you're asking or which of the demands you're looking at, but this one I've seen online. There are about 15 of them, from scrapping the 1999 Constitution and replacing it with a people-made Constitution, to tossing the Senate arm of the Nigerian legislative system, keeping the House of Reps, paying Nigerian workers a minimum wage of nothing less than 250,000 naira monthly, investing heavily in education. Now, I'm reeling this out for you to pick out the ones that you think, because we talked about having goals that are smart, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. Relevant and time-bound. So the question is, which of them do you think are smart and achievable? So the next one is release Nnamdi Kanu. And I think that Mr. Bwala, a lawyer, has spoken about that. Renationalize publicly owned enterprises sold to government officials and cronies, reinstate a corruption-free subsidy regime, pro-past and present Nigerian leaders. That's 8. Then the 9th one on that list is restructuring Nigeria to accommodate diversity, then end banditry terrorism, establish special energy fund, immediate reconstitution of Nigerian electoral body, INEC, then 3 more, because there are 15 on this particular one. Massive investment in public works and industrialization, massive shake-up in Nigerian judiciary, and diaspora voting. Now, this one has 15. Another one has 10. And we've seen shorter ones as well. For some people, it's just end hunger. It's just one. So for you, you've seen these demands, at least from one of the groups protesting. What do you think the government should be focusing on in terms of resolving them?
If you look at the majority of the people out there, that the people who have not even seen this, all what matters to them is that they want to hit. They want to live a good life. You see, all these things, whether the Constitution is 1999 or 2024, it doesn't matter. As long as they can eat, they can feed their children. So to me, I think the goal right now is more about the micro and microeconomic policies that can quickly change things around and can put food, affordable food on the tables of Nigerians is what matters. See, in UK, they're also having the same problem. They are not. The reason why there was the massive turnout of voters to push out the current government was because people were hungry. They just needed somebody who would just come there and give them what they want. And see, that's the focus here. Talking about the demands being smart, you have to put it within the context of the 10 days strike period, because for you to give them protest period, that means you have to give them something. And so when you say smart, you have to put it within that context. That will they be smart enough to be achieved within 10 days? The answer is no. The things that are here cannot be achieved in 10 days. Yeah, there can be some kind of a gesture or some action or statement that can kickstart the process, but you cannot see the results in 10 days. These are constitutional matters, and constitutional matter will still have to go back to the the National Assembly, and it has to go through the process. We start back from the community. So let's say these are the takes from the community to say this is what we want, and then there are various representatives who have to actually debate it or probably present a bill. But I know there have been several attempts at trying to tinker with that constitution, but you can't just throw a constitution away. Something must guide the law process. So it is either this constitution has to now be
we'll take it to our guest in Abuja. Let's take it to Mr. Ologbondiyan. Mr. Ologbondiyan, maybe still speaking to some of these demands. If you look at these demands, as he said, some are long-term. Perhaps the protesters are looking for a pronouncement. So, for instance, the president coming out to say, we will review the Constitution, or we will scrap the Constitution, or what's the next one? Toss the National Assembly, which is going to be a war anyway, between politicians as to whether to remove the Senate and leave the House of Reps. Where I'm going to with this is, as you speak to this, with that in mind, there is something happening that, since you're a politician, I think you have to speak to, which has to do with the pattern of protest, whether politicians are indeed sensitive. Because it looks like this is the new norm, and every political leadership has to brace up for this new norm. The last time we had a leadership kind of protest was in 2012. Enough is enough. NSAS was leaderless. The one in Kenya, Gen Z, leaderless. Now this leaderless. This generation are writing their own rules. Are we going to subscribe to their rules, or we are going to keep fighting them? That's the question.
Thank you very much. I don't think I don't think we're in a good environment when anybody will want to be called a politician. So maybe you should have called me an on-the-air personality. But that is by the way. Going into your question, it is clear, and absolutely so, that any politician in Nigeria today who wants to contest election or wants to govern their country must take cognizance of the Gen Z. This is very important. We have them all around us. Statement of fact. As children, as nephews, as cousins. And when you listen to their discussions, the questions they raise, even before their parents, are very, very deep and strong. And they can even tell you that, look, you think we don't know. People are wasting our time. That is the generation that we are talking about. So the political class must reawaken itself by providing recognition to this Gen Z group, because even to go and vote, they are going to dominate the election. So I think that yes, some of their demands are far-fetched. Some are presently unrealizable because of the constitution of the because of the 1999 constitution as amended and the provisions so contained therein. But I am of the opinion that moving forward, the aspect that has to do with Mr. President will be considered. What are these aspects? Is it impossible for Mr. President to review his policies and come back to Nigerians and say for so and so and so reason, the policies that I'm implementing, they are irreversible? Primarily, let us take the issue of subsidy. Because whatever touches petroleum product in this country has touched every Nigerian. Maybe you are an elite, maybe you are a farmer, maybe you are a roadside mechanic, maybe you are a tailor, whatever profession you belong to, whatever touches on petroleum products has touched the heart of your individual. So having said that, I believe that if we look at where we are coming from, particularly during the Jonathan administration and the late Umar Musa Yar'Adua's administration, we found ourselves in situations like this. How did we come out of it? I think this is the question that the president needs to ask himself. I also believe that it is not enough for my friend who, although initially didn't want to greet me, and I talk about Bwala, to come and say that, oh, money has been given to state governors. So the average Nigerian on the streets there is not interested that you give money to governor. You know what he's interested in? He believes that that money that you say you are giving to governor, why don't you revert it to the issue of subsidy and bring down the cost of petroleum? That is the thinking of the average Nigerian. For the economists, they might say that it is wrong. But for the layman, who doesn't understand all the data issues, who doesn't understand the macroeconomics and all those terminologies, what concerns him is what is he getting from government. And the Asiwaju that I think I know has a relationship, or used to have relationships with ordinary people on the streets. It is the same ordinary people on the streets that are now crying. Have you examined what Nigerians pay for a kilowatt of electricity? Is that a wish of government? So we have gone to a level where Nigerians are now saying that, look, the years of the previous party that you say that they are horrible, and you say you want to lead us to somewhere, is it possible for you to take us back there? That's the situation in which Nigerians have found themselves. But I believe that governance is not cast in iron. And I believe that governance must be responsive and responsible too on the side of the people. Anything outside of that is working for oneself, not working for the generality of the people.
Mr. Ologbondiyan, I'm going to stay with you for a bit before we go on to the next guest. And I'm also going to be speaking to you as a politician. Indeed, states are also receiving increased FAC allocation, and there's been a lot of talk about how there's been concentration on the federal government, on the presidency to address Nigerians. But states are also in this mix to the extent that they have a lot more spending to do. And PDP states, are also, captured in the mix as well. So has there been accountability, from the states, if we place the demands of the protesters against the backdrop of the responsibility of state governors? Has there been enough accountability from the states?
I think we'll be missing the question. It will limit this discussion on the basis of parties. You heard me talking to, I think, Kayode, approaching Kayode, and I said that, look, this is not the time to be called a politician in Nigeria. Because you can as well be the victim, even though you are not in government. So I think the issues that we have in the country today is about our collective development. And it's not the issue of which party do I belong to. Does Hunger know who is in PDP or who is a member of APC? Because the policies of government has been implemented across now with a terribly low purchasing power, recognizes that you are in PDP or you are in APC, except you are the one in government. So I think our approach could be such that, look, what are the challenges that are confronting us? If I come here to speak as a politician, if I come here to speak as a member of PDP, I will not provide advice or reasons on how the government can get out of the can take us out of this quagmire. I won't. I will speak like a politician. But I'm not speaking here as a politician. I'm talking as a Nigerian who is also affected by the situation in which we have found ourselves. So when you talk about, what are the governors doing? I have said it, that in the opinion of Nigerians, rather than impose taxes on us as a people in terms of removal of subsidy, rather than looking for revenue from us, the ordinary people, to go and give to governors, and you now turn around to be complaining that the governors are not using the fund that you are providing for them. What Nigerians are saying is this: such fund, can they be reverted back to the issue of subsidy and see whether the cost of petroleum products can come down?
Mr. Ologbondiyan,
I think that's more important.
You are now speaking like a politician, not like an on-air personality. So we need to really figure out which one. But let's expand the conversation. We still have Mr. Daniel Bwala and Professor Ogbu right here with us. But I'd like us to take a listen to a lawyer, Inibe Effiong, who tried to articulate the issues, the pain points. Then we'll, of course, expand the conversation. He was speaking on Channels Television last night.
Because constitutionally, every state is entitled to a minister plus the FCT. There is no reason why Nigeria should have more than 37 ministers. So when the protesters say they need you to reduce the cost of governance, these are actions that can be taken under 24 hours. People say they want electoral reform. Shehu, you saw how the Akpabio Senate and the counterpart in the House of Reps convened to amend the Police Act to extend the tenure of the IG within 24 hours. Under 24 hours emergency session, they also passed an Appropriation Act. If the president is serious about addressing the protesters, by now the Federal Ministry of Justice would have come up with a draft bill to amend the Electoral Act and send it to the National Assembly to make electronic transmission of results mandatory under our law. This is one of the demands. If the president is serious, if the president is really serious, he would have addressed, right, other demands of the protesters, including economic policies that have been introduced, that have rendered Nigerians homeless, that have rendered Nigerians hungry. They told us on the 29th of May last year, Shewun, that the president has removed subsidy. We are aware from records that the last year, you can fact check me, about 3 trillion was paid for subsidy. Where is the fuel? We are still having queues. People cannot find it to buy. They have increased the cost of the electricity tariff. That has now made a mess of power in our country.
All right, let me take this to Mr. Bwala now. So he tried to articulate the pain point, and I imagine that you can relate. Things like the cabinet of the president shouldn't be as big as that. If we say that we don't have as much revenue, then it should reflect in the appointment. He talked about amending the Electoral Act, making electronic transmission compulsory. He talked about subsidy and questions the fact that it looks like we're paying subsidy, but the prices aren't dropping. So what exactly is going on there? It looks like that opaque nature has come back. You talked about electricity tariff. These aren't too much to take on for a government, are they, Mr. Bwala?
Right. So I quite agree with some of the points he has raised. They are valid arguments and valid points to be considered. And some of them requires reform of the Constitution and the Electoral Act, like when he talks about electoral reform. And reform of the Constitution, or rather reform of the Electoral Act, for which you have to provide the baseline in the Constitution, is not what will happen in 2-3 days. So if they said they are going to stay on the street until the full implementation of that, I doubt if that is a good course of action. With respect to the cabinet, it's also a valid point to say that given the economic situation of the country, there is need for you to reconsider the size of the cabinet and reduce it. But maybe what I would have called for the protester to do again, I've always believed in detail, to go beyond that and look at the cost of a cabinet, for example, the cost of maintaining the ministry and the budget of the ministry, and then the effectiveness of otherwise of that cabinet. Because if, for example, there is a ministry that is necessary, take, for example, agriculture, and lately we have seen livestock taken out of agriculture to make it 2 ministries. These are critical ministries for the survival of the country. These are ministries that are critical to meeting the hunger that we talked about, the economic realities that people are confronted by. And you cannot, given the circumstances, say there is no need for you to create another livestock if evidence shows that creating livestock out of agriculture will be able to diversify the people and have some focus that will produce results. So it is what I believe that they can, evaluate and see the cost, and if it is unnecessary, then it is worth taking out. If it is necessary, then what can we do, or what have we been doing to take care of other areas that we think the reason why these areas are not taken care of is because we have a bloated cabinet. Take, for example, subsidy matter, which is what, in fact, virtually all the speakers have talked about. The truth of the matter is that petroleum subsidy in Nigeria is a scam. And so we can't go back to petroleum subsidy. However, the federal government is subsidizing virtually every aspect of the life of the common man. This rice, this 50 kg of rice to be sold for 40 is a subsidy. The government is looking to subsidizing healthcare. And you know that our people, we have healthcare issues in Nigeria. You can never underestimate the danger of healthcare in Nigeria. The government is looking to, subsidize healthcare and make sure, okay, the other day somebody was talking in your TV station and was talking about the cost of the price of drug, I think for diabetes or something like that. The government can come into these areas that affect the health of the people. The government is also subsidizing transportation. We talk about the CNG bus, they talk about the rail system and the rest. In Abuja, for example, since the commissioning of that rail, and they said for the next 6 months it's going to be free. There are many more areas that as a government you can subsidize to touch on the poor man than subsidizing for petroleum product that goes to the rich and those who are involved in that scam in that industry. So, and it's just like what the professor said, that it's not that subsidy is bad, it is the mismanagement of subsidy that is the problem. So anybody, to me, who is talking about restoration of subsidy in petroleum, I don't think that person is detailed, and I don't think that person means well, because the other time there was a cost analysis that was done in the subsidy industry of petroleum, and they said that it doesn't touch on the common man. It is just scammers who get the subsidy money. They move the oil out of the shores of Nigeria, and then it doesn't, and not everybody has car anyway. So we look to redistributing the wealth in the areas that is very, very important and critical to our people. Nobody is in delusion or in doubt of this fact that reforms are not going to be comfortable. Ask anybody who talks about A, B, or C. Can there be comfort in any jurisdiction of this world where you are bringing reform? But our situation will not be the same in the next 1 or 2 years, because that would have been the fulfillment of some of this reform foundation that is being laid. This is my initial reaction to the very issues raised by Indebe.
All right, let's take it to Prof. Prof, I would like you to speak to some more economic issues, which is what brought us here in the first place. And in focus will be the NNPCL. I remember when Melekari took over in 2019 after Maikantu Barrow, and he made some promises. He said there will be transparency and this opaque thing will be out of the window. But this is 5 years down the line. We're still seeing NNPCL as an opaque organization. On the other hand, he said within the lifetime of this administration, talking about the Buhari administration, the refineries will come upstream. None has come upstream. And Melekari still has a job. So what we are saying, my question is, what can be done with the NNPCL as relating to managing our resources, which is our cash cow, to ensure that there is some level of returns that is clearly defined as a people that can begin to help the government, because now we have forward sales, advances, crude-backed loans, mortgages, and all of that that is even biting harder, which is why we're having the Dangote refinery issue. I wanted you to speak to that gamut of issues for us.
Well, thank you. I think the issue, let me get back to the issue of even petroleum subsidy. I think that it's not fair to say that petroleum subsidy in itself is the same as every other subsidy. I think we have to make that distinction, that it is a critical input in every aspect of production. So it is something to be watched very carefully. And this idea of throwing the baby with the bathwater, what we cannot manage, we say it is wrong. And they are not human who are managing it. So let's return to the NNPC. NNPC is an institution that Nigerians and Nigerian governments must focus on, because it is the life wire of this country. It is where our foreign exchange is generated. Is where our revenues that are distributed to all the tiers of government is generated. So it cannot be and should not be business as usual. Quite frankly, it is scandalous that we have 4 refineries and none is working. The reason why petroleum prices have not come down is because as you were removing subsidy, you were also deregulating the exchange rate. So the importation and landing price has also gone up. So if you ask me, I think we need to re-examine the activities of NNPC. And what I expected, let's be honest, is that in the first 6 months of any government that came in, 1 or 2 of the refineries, I mean, this should be a mandate, should be up and running. It shouldn't take a year. And if it has taken a year plus, then we should be asking NNPC questions. So if we had refineries working, perhaps the petroleum prices will come down, because you will not be importing petroleum with foreign exchange that does not exist. And perhaps that money could have gone into other things. You know, the issue that has arisen with the Dangote, and I'm very pleased that the federal government has approved that Dangote should be petrol, oil should be sold to Dangote, crude, not in dollars, but in naira, makes a lot of sense. Because what you're likely to see is that indeed prices of petroleum might start coming down. But I have said earlier that what this protest has, the signaling, is that people are not happy with the political class. People are not happy with the way they are governed. And it's not just federal, it is both state, it's both local government. People think that certain things are said, but what is done is different from what is said. What I would suggest is that in the coming budget, the signaling should be very clear as to how are we going to reduce the waste and inefficiencies in government. Our current budgeting system is extremely problematic, is not directing resources to the productive areas. We are still having too many institutions duplicating functions, and we had this promise that this will be reviewed, the so-called Orasanya report, to reduce this governance. If you look at the Charter of Demands, it is all centering on people's perception that government is asking the citizens to tighten, and the government themselves may not necessarily be tightening their own belts. And I think once you begin to, it is really extremely important that the coming budget signals a new direction, a new intent, a slimmer, more efficient use of public resources.
Oh, Prof, could you give us specifics? Could you give us specifics? What would you have us do with the exchange rate?
No country actually floats their currency, let's be honest. Even America watches how the dollar is performing. You know, Nigerians think that the dollar is just free floating, or the pound is free floating. Because it affects trade, both import and export. And so every country, you have to have a managed, like I said, our market is not deep. You need, let me go back a little bit. When you are at this stage of development, you need a strong hand of government. But to have a strong hand of government, you need a strong state capacity. And the state capacity means a state capacity that is driven by merit, a state capacity that can incentivize, a state capacity that can punish. So if you don't have this state capacity, and that's why we keep saying subsidy was mismanaged, it's because there was no accountability and there's no punishment. State capacity can manage subsidy. You have to have a state capacity that manages subsidy. Based on the criteria these things have now enumerated, institutions have been set up in Nigeria without accountability. All you hear is that somebody has been removed and so on. No, there has not been any punishment. So when you set up institutions that have clear mandates and they deviate from that mandate, and it goes back to how even we constitute the boards of these institutions that take the institutions in the directions in which they flout their own mandate. So it is important that we understand that strong bureaucracy, effective bureaucracy, a bureaucracy that can incentivize the system. You know, I talked earlier about leadership style, substance, and style. And people have been saying the president should address the nation. I think the president should even call the state governors to a crisis meeting. Because we tend to think, because there's an urgent need to industrialize the nation. That's why I kept saying that we have a supply crisis.
Okay, so if I could just jump in there, concerning the foreign exchange, would you also subscribe that we peg it at a certain limit?
It is not pegged, it's managed.
With a strong
Meaning
institution.
You watch your inflows and outflows and create a certain basket around it. You don't just throw it and say demand and supply. No. Nobody does that. No, not at the level at which we are. Remember, this is a country where the major supplier of foreign exchange is from one source. You need to create multiple sources to diversify so that you can even begin to have a semblance of a market. Once you don't have that, what you need to do is to have a sense, almost an index that the central bank can work out.
Okay, so
that says if the value or revenue from oil goes to a certain level. Yeah.
If the president calls this emergency meeting with the governors,
yes,
what will the agenda be?
The agenda will be, for instance, how can states become hubs of production? Listen, you can do palliative all you like. If people don't have jobs, they won't have income. If we don't increase productivity, income will not rise. If that doesn't happen, growth will not take place. So the states must become hubs of innovation, where in fact, a certain pot of money can be put aside to incentivize either on a state by state or region by region on the ideas they put on the table. I've always believed that the National Economic Council be used better. this council that brings the state governors, the federal government, the certain ministries together, to begin not come to do the sharing, but to begin to say, how do we increase the baking of the cake?
Okay, so can you quickly set agenda for the local governments now that they'll be getting their funds directly, as the law has said? What should they be focusing on?
Yes, absolutely. By the way, are you aware that what propelled the growth in China came from local authorities? The local authorities were competing for industries to locate in their locality. In other words, both the states, both the local governments can begin to act as venture capitalists, begin to support and attract industries that will create jobs and generate income from the people. This is so fundamental. It's like the crisis in food, for crying out loud.
Okay.
I think that the current insecurity has not helped.
Okay.
A lot of people are not returning to the farm. And I think this romanticization of peasant farming and small-scale farming must stop. We must encourage some large-scale farming. We are quickly too, by incentivizing them. We are not using our banks of industry, bank of agriculture in very strategic manners. They are scattering the little assets they have. I call it coordination failure. That federal government has set institutions, but no one is coordinating these institutions to pursue specific agenda. The Ministry of Trade and Industry must have a certain policy that allows these institutions not to scatter the little assets they have in various forms, but to channel them in a strategic manner in the direction in which we must now begin to see that the country is not industrializing. You cannot deal with issues of poverty without a very strong manufacturing sector, for instance. It has never happened.
Well, Prof, to be
so why is that not a focus? And why is it that even when we do a budget, we don't see a signaling in that direction?
To be honest, I really wish that we could just focus on you and, keep the conversation with you, because there's so many more questions to ask you. And I see some of our, guests concurring. Mr. Ologbondiyan, you seem to be concurring vehemently with what Prof is saying. He's spoken about quite a number of things, talked about the supply crisis and the fact that, no country actually throws out its currency to just be floated. It has to be a managed float. I guess that the CBN will have responses in that regard, but part of what Prof, or a lot of what Prof has said is the kind of, those kind of ideas come up in places where we have room for debate, which is what our political class should be about. Where ideas should contend. You have said that in this instance, nobody wants to be referred to as a politician because of what the political class is now known for. But ideally, these are the sort of conversations that should dominate the political class. Where do you think that this sort of conversations can now happen? Under what forums? Because we know that preceding any presidential election, we see that the different groups try to engage the political candidates to see what it is that they actually have in store. Would we say that as a country we have a place where these sort of ideas can actually be debated, interrogated? For instance, the president removed subsidy. There have been lots of questions after that, but it seems nobody is answering, or they're answering piecemeal.
Thank you very much, Mark. Before I go into that, I want to express a surprise that Bwala can come before Nigerians and declare that, there's nothing government can do about the issue of fuel subsidy, whereas I have listed 2 governments in the past who has had reason to bring down the cost of petroleum products. But having said that, I know that what this government needs is a war room situation. And we have maintained from May 29, 2023, that the current administration doesn't seem to have what it takes to run the economy. If you listen to Prof, and you listen to the points that he quietly raised, he doesn't want to blame government. But everything that he has said revolved around government action. And what is the essence of the National Economic Council, for instance? If, like you rightly observed, that the responses we have been getting on subsidy have been piecemeal. And even on the streets of this country, even on the streets out there, Nigerians are being told that even the federal government is still paying subsidy. As we are speaking, even at the cost of buying black market fuel at 1,000 naira. So who is talking to us? What is the responses we are getting from government? So it is convenient to say that, oh, we are giving money to the states. And I keep saying this. And I will keep saying it. It's convenient to say we are giving money to the states. What are the governors doing about it? You know there was this challenge. There's nobody that's in government at the national that never knew that there was this challenge. Before they began to pay extra money to the accounts of the states outside their FAC. And I said the question Nigerians are asking is that rather than doing this, why don't you put this money in what can be of benefit to every Nigerian?
Extra money to governors, I didn't get that.
No. There was a report yesterday or this morning, yesterday, that the Minister of Information said that outside FAC, every state, the totality of the state and FCT has gotten 570 billion.
That is interesting because we do know for a fact that quite a number of governors have now sued the federal government at the Supreme Court, saying that not all that has accrued to FAC has been distributed as it ought to be. So there are questions around that, that particular situation for FAC as well. The governors are alleging that as much as 40% of what accrues to FAC is not getting to them, and they're taking that matter to court.
I agree with you. I'm aware also. But it boils down to the fact that who is communicating with Nigerians. And I'll keep saying this. Look at President Olusegun Obasanjo. If you recall, he had a media parley every month when he was president, where he was talking to Nigerians. Communication is key in governance, more so in a democratic governance. We are not running a monarchical system of government in which nobody can approach the king except you are invited. This is a democracy, and it's even a constitutional democracy. And that is why this protest came up. And look, Markwe, lest I forget, can you imagine that even the president of the Senate, who runs the bastion of our democracy, will come out and tell protesters that they can keep protesting while they are eating? So I think issues like this spur the violence, or spur the protests, or spur the protesters. And if you are talking about him, people in government, instead of sitting down with the president and providing the right advice, and those who claim to be friends of the president today, who are hovering around him, instead of sitting down with the president and providing the right answers to the issues, they are just dancing around the question.
Mr. Bwala, I guess we can come to you now with especially with around conversations of communication, because for people who also know that this issue of subsidy has been in the air for so long, governments that have toyed with it sometimes have touched it with caution because of this sort of reaction, the reaction that we're currently seeing on the streets of Nigeria. Do you think that there has been sufficient communication? Because as far as people are concerned, what they know is that cost of everyday living has gone up. They're not exactly sure why that is. They know that, as a result of the removal of subsidy, but they're not certain why subsidy had to be taken away, and perhaps how deep the implications were going to be on their personal lives. Would you say that the president has been engaging enough of Nigerians in his communication with them?
So, although it's debatable, there are people who would think that the communication is not enough, and they can have facts to back it. But I think that the policy of the president has been disseminated to the Nigerian people through different channels. Let me quickly, in direct response to your point about subsidy, disagree with the professor and also answer Bra Kola. You see, I believe that we can speak to the facts rather than speak through emotions. Regarding the removal of subsidy and the floating of the naira, in order for you to return back to the oil subsidy, in order for you to manage the naira, you need, and these are facts that can be checked, you need on an average $22 billion annually to be able to do that. The question is, where is the money? Especially because as a country, we do not have manufacturers, we do not have other means of production. Our reliance is on oil. So you are going to have to rely on increased output to generate the $22 billion to take care of that. In order for you to generate the output that will match with the $22 billion, you will have to increase the production of the oil to 3.1 million barrels per day. You have to raise it to 3.1 million barrels per day. In order for you to be able to do the 3.1 million barrels per day, you need $40 billion investment in that regard. Where is the money? Let's keep emotions aside. This is a sad reality that confronts us right in the face.
Bwala, just before you proceed, could you just let us know what source is that so everyone can check it?
I mean, you can see Statistens. Statistens is one of those sources. And then these other economists, Real One. Is it Real One? Real One. There's a name, Real One something. Okay. Something. He's also an economist that also talked about that. So the truth of the matter, Mr. Chamberlain, is the reason why we had to cancel the subsidy for oil and the reason why we had to float the naira is because we couldn't sustain the subsidy because there was no money. Buhari, all through his time, was collecting money, and by the time he left office, we have 73 trillion naira that Tinubu must pay over a period of 3 years. So, and for you to be able to raise the money, nobody around the world will give you $22 billion every year for you to give subsidy. So you have to generate it through your means of production, which is the oil. And the output that we have as of today cannot match that. So you have to raise it to 3.1. And for you to be able to raise it to 3.1, you need an investment of $40 billion. Where is the money? Let us not speak emotions. Let us speak to facts.
But the Prof said that you can't just float your currency. And there's been countries with several economists have highlighted those countries, also there for everybody to check, where they floated their currency and it was catastrophic economically. He says you have to have a strong management system to ensure that those checks are also there, not just blatant floating of the currency, he says.
So the use of the words strong management system is a catchphrase. Let the professor give us the specifics of what he meant by that. Something that is touchable, something that is relatable as a fact that can support that premise. Okay. But one thing about economics, Mr. Chamberlain, is that it's a theory. And there are different views in economic theory, just like in law.
Let me speak a little bit about specifics. Maybe also in addition to what Mr. Ologbondiyan has said, in 2007, the late President Yaradua reduced the price of petrol from 75 naira to 65 naira. In 2015, former President Jonathan slashed the electricity tariff by over 50%. Those are specifics. Why can't this government follow a similar trajectory?
The answer is simple. Your reference to Yaradua, check out the oil production at the time. Check out the oil production and the sale and the revenue as at the time. With respect to 2015 of Jonathan, also check out the oil production as at that time and the profits that we make. And this is without prejudice to insecurity and damaged infrastructure that has happened. This protest that we're talking about, do you know for every single day of protest, federal government loses 500 billion naira? Let us speak to facts. So that I'm interested in hearing the professor telling us the specifics of what must be done in order to manage the naira. He used another word to say manage the naira. Some economists say show off the naira. Whatever it is, your currency is supposed to compete. And if you want to help the currency not to compete, you need money. So I am interested in hearing his own perspective of the specifics that will help manage the naira.
Okay, before we come to the Prof, he is going to speak to it. He's going to speak to you. Prof, just hold on a minute. Mr. Bwala, can you tell us, what do you know about the subsidy? Is government subsidizing petrol at the moment?
Yes, I am aware, although it is not officially said by the government, but I'm aware that there are some bits of subsidy here and there. And I have a direct response in 30 seconds to you regarding that. The IMF policy that the government seeks to implement recognizes what they call strong country ownership. It's part of the exception to the general rule in the IMF policy that talk about strong country ownership. And what that means is that in implementing the IMF policy, you're permitted to tinker where necessary with policies that will be tailored to the specifics of the peculiarity of your environment. The federal government is applying the strong country ownership in the implementation of the policy. That's why, even though it is removed, but there are times that are 1 or 2 areas that the government will need to intervene.
So in other words, the government should be straight with Nigerians and tell us we are subsidizing petrol.
Not directly, because if the government at this stage and the moment where we are if the government is not going to in some way subsidize oil one way or the other, the price of liter per day will be about 1,600. Mr. Prof, I'm waiting for the exciting perspective you will give us about
Mr. Bwala, if I may, because there are a number of things that Prof said, and this is not me, Prof is still very much here. He can very much repeat what he said, but what I want to bring into perspective was Prof also talked about, consequences. We know that we were not here say 15 years ago, for instance. We know that we had healthy reserves. We knew, for instance, that we had how will I put it now? I'm trying to remember the excess crude account. There was a very healthy reserve left in excess crude account. There were attempts to start a savings, a sovereign wealth fund. We saw the stiff resistance from governors who said, oh, federal government cannot manage a savings account for us. We can save by ourselves. We saw how Mrs. Okonjo-Iweala forcefully had to push through a $1 billion savings in sovereign wealth fund. I mean, there was a time when this country was experiencing boom, and we also experienced a bust of some sort. But there have been times when the amount of money we had in reserves could cushion the effect of what it was that was happening globally. But we have since seen a decline. We've seen, yes, oil prices crash, but we've also seen a mismanagement of resources without, commensurate consequences for those who have mismanaged these resources in many facets. I mean, we saw, for instance, a comprehensive probe into fuel subsidy mismanagement pre-2015 under the Jonathan administration. And we saw how government managed that. I mean, these things I'm talking about is not just under one administration. So there have been years of, bad behavior without consequences for this. And it would seem that government is throwing his hands up in the air and saying, look, as a result of what has happened, we're ditching subsidy altogether, which is now having an adverse effect on the people of Nigeria. Would you say that, government should once again visit the issue of consequence, or will it be too much for any government to undertake?
I agree with you, Margaret, that the lack of consequences has resulted in a lot of the problems we see today. And the simple word is corruption. Corruption has led to the mismanagement of the resources. But in answering that also, I must relate it with what Brother Kola said about the states. You see, if you look at what we are getting today as revenue arising from this oil, whatever, removal of the subsidy, there is a distribution formula that gives the federal government 40-something%, that gives the state 20.6%, and the local government 20.2%. So in other words, close to half of the increase goes to the state. But the federal government is one. The federal workers are few. The rest of Nigeria are in the state. In other words, 70% of our entire economy rests on the state. This money goes to them. Very few states have shown any sign of improvement in the welfare of their people. Now, Brother Kola is saying that there is no need federal government continue to give it to the governor, rather they should find ways of doing it. My answer to him would be, that may be the ideal, but that's not what our law supports. We're running a federation system of government where you have federal government and state government, and the federal government cannot do the state on how they use the funds. There was a time I gave an opinion I say, instead of the extra 10 billion that the federal government is giving to them, tell all the states, just like the way they do in UBEC, give us the things you want to be done in your state. We want to execute it directly from the center. Because every money that goes to the state goes to the pocket of the governor. The punishment, Maokwe, to this is that let the protesters and Nigerians raise their awareness to the fact that the state governors are not meeting up to expectation, which is the reason why the situation is the way it is. The consequence is impeachment. But who can impeach a governor? Because he has 308, the federal government can't do anything about that. If you say the House of Assembly will be able to do that, do they have the independence necessary? You talk about the local government, and the president has commenced that autonomy policy by first of all giving that autonomy to the local government, who will come to the State House of Assembly. We want to strengthen this democracy. Every January in America, when the president appears before Congress, there is this thing called the State of the Union. Their opening remarks will always be that America has not reached its ideal, but we have come a long way, and we are all marching towards a better union.
It points us back to what the people are asking for, the president speaking to the people, because in that State of the Union address, he has to address the union and talk to us. Let's see what's going on with that union. So you're saying the same thing indirectly. We appreciate that. So we have live feeds coming through now from Ojota on the streets. Let's take a look at that now, where the protesters are continuing. Remember, that was the very interesting point of conversion yesterday. So look at that now.
If there are people like us, they come out, just to beg, I beg, we feel no chop, just give us food to chop, just give us water to chop, we need to ask everything. If we protest finish, if we talk for finish, we don't even follow police fight, we don't even friend it to them, we don't go look out from here and reach them, they don't nab us. Is it good? We know where our money they go. Yaya Bello pay almost $700,000 in advance. Too much. The women are too much. He paid $700,000 in advance to American school. Our school day here.
Okay, so there you go. Some of the protesters still highlighting part of the challenges of the rising cost of living, where they think it is you heard that unbearable, how they have to cough out certain amounts of money which they say they barely can have to eke out a living, let alone pay that one. And you can see members of the Nigerian police force, officials of Nigerian police force, also on hand. Just there is too close proximity between the police and the protesters. But I mean, you can clearly see no hostility, even though some of them will tell you, look, detachment with that amount and intimidate some people. But we'll get you more updates on that particular scenario and elsewhere in different parts of the country as we get them. Okay, let's get back to you, Prof. I hope we haven't lost your train of thought. So quite a number of things for you to respond to from Mr. Bwala and others. You have the floor now. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. You know, I said earlier that policies are not made on television. We're just having a conversation. When we sit down in a room and we look at the data, it will become obvious the direction in which we will take. But let me say this. By the way, theory, just like subsidy, is not a bad word. Theory is what underpins practice. And people tend to look at theory as something that is irrelevant. In fact, it is so fundamental. It is the absence of theory. I have always asked this question anytime decisions are made, and I will ask, what is the theory of choice? Why did you take part A instead of part B or part C? That's the theory. And so you examine the full implications and consequences. That's the theory. So if you don't have theory and you jump into practice, the consequences are immense. And so many people that come on television are actually those who claim to practice without theory. So we have to be extremely careful. But you see, the issue with revenue, what we have not considered is that we are losing over, as they said, maybe 400 or something billion in oil theft. It goes back daily. It goes back to the point I made earlier. In this time and age with technology. So if we're having revenue shortfalls, if we're not increasing our production, if we're investing in oil, are these not what policies can also tackle? Are these not also what incentivization can also tackle? Are these not also what that state capacity can deal with? I said the state capacity must be merit-based, must incentivize, must punish. Accountability, which is the word that is lacking, is what we have not seen in our public, and it has nothing to do with this regime. It's been all over. And I mentioned how even our predecessors are governed and the people we put to run them. Even when we make appointments in the governing boards, sometimes they are not reflective of those who will enhance those institutions. So there are a lot of things to examine. The point I made about managing the currency, and I referred to it. I said, you know, you have a research department of the central bank. It used to be quite strong, extremely strong. That department can compute an index that allows the bank to manage this exchange rate. It's not something we can discuss on television. So there are a couple of things, and you know, a reference was made about how money was being saved in the school account and so on. That was real. It is true that, yes, there was maybe a lot more money flowing into the coffers of the government at that time. But let me make this important point. Nations can grow even when there are no new investments. All they need to do is to get more productivity out of existing assets by reducing waste, reallocating resources where they are mostly needed, and improving efficiency. Not rocket science, but it requires discipline, requires that state capacity, and requires leadership.
Okay, well, we'll still get perspectives from Mr. Ologbondiyan and Mr. Bwala in a moment, but we need to bring in Mr. Adetayo. Let me speak to the images we see in the picture there about the protest, Mr. Adetayo. Well, we also do know, what can you tell us about the conduct of police officials? Because if you look at that image, yes, you see the protesters just there, peaceful at the moment, but when you have that detachment of that retinue of officers being in that proximity, that close, is that an intimidation tactic, saying, yeah, you better stay here, don't move, or something like that? What do you think of, for those who think that way?
Well, things like that can easily be interpreted in different directions. I know part of what the protesters demanded was for police protection. So it could be seen as a police protection, being there to ensure that you know, the protests are not hijacked or hoodlums, they are not attacked by hoodlums. And some other people could want to interpret it as, you know, trying to intimidate them. But so far, I think the conduct of the security agencies, like I said before, most importantly, the Nigerian police have been commendable. I can say that. I've seen lots of videos. I've been on the street myself, and I've seen the way that they've been relating with the protesters, and also situations where we saw people, looting. They have used minimal force to try to curtail that. To me, that is lots of progress coming from the Nigerian police under IGP Ogbu, and we must actually take note of this. If you compare this with what we've experienced in the past, because it is a complete departure, we're seeing, security agencies that are living up to expectation. It could have been worse than this. From experience in the past, but so far we've shown maturity from both sides, both from the protester, because the protesters also needs protection from those who may want to attack them, protection from those who may want to hijack the protest. So it's important that we have police protests, and also we shouldn't forget the fact that there are those that are not on the streets that also requires protection. They want their asset protected, they want their businesses protected, so they are present out there, largely securing, can be seen to be for securing the nation as a whole.
In terms of ensuring that we bridge this us and them mindset of the police and the people, what would have been wrong in this particular instance of the protest if the policemen had come out with maybe water cannon, protective gear, shield, such that you de-escalate the protest as opposed to just having your gun? Because there are people who have PTSD where accidental discharge has happened time and again. So being very close to officers with their hands on the trigger, just waiting to pull it, could be trigger happy. So is it against the mindset of the police to actually see them come up with this kind of gear?
I say we actually need to look at our society carefully. If you go to Britain, United Kingdom, you hardly see weapon. I was surprised when I saw some police officers in Gatwick Airport of recent, and I was seeing them carrying assault weapon. It's quite unusual in such crime, and that's why you see that most of the crimes and criminality are knife related. In countries like United States, weapons are everywhere, guns are everywhere. In the airport, you see pistols, you see assault rifle. The mere sight of an assault weapon does not give anybody PTSD in the United States. Nigeria is a country that we've grown, we evolved from a long military rule. AK-47 is more or less like, a daily visuals, optics in Nigeria. I don't think that a 10-year-old will be scared of seeing AK-47 in Nigeria, because it has become part and parcel of our society. Even you hardly see policemen carrying pistols nowadays, because the challenges we are facing are coming from criminals that are also using assault weapons. And that's the reason why it's become part and parcel of our law enforcement. However, because what I saw mostly out there are policemen and women, members of the Nigerian Civil Defense Corps, in their normal, usual, regular police attires, and few of them carrying weapons. And you see this red tape on their, band on their armpit, showing that they are there for protest duty. And I think that even looks better, than policemen wearing anti-riot gears, shield. That will look more confrontational. It will look more how will I put it, intimidating to the protesters. Yeah. So I think we've done well so far.
I still need to, I'd like to ask you, why, since you've been in service, so perhaps it's just trying to understand the mindset, if it's the same. Why is it that most officers, people talk about, even if you create a new agency tomorrow, they will almost always be very hostile and angry with the people, with the populace. Why is that always the case? We're not the cause of their problems.
Okay, so part of the things I learned growing up is that the society creates the kind of leadership that it gets. Nigerians are generally angry, hostile. There are lots of people out there that all what they have in mind is to take from you. They don't want to give back. And it is still from the same society that we recruit men into the Nigerian police force, from the same society that we elect people into government. So I've always been talking about us going back and look at the family as a unit of the society. What kind of family institutions are we building in this country? How responsible are the fathers, are the mothers? How well are they training their children? How well have they supported their family to ensure that, they build values in them and they don't end up becoming a problem to the society? If you go out there now...
I'm sorry to jump in, Mr. Adetayo, but aren't those two different things? Look, as a civilian and as an officer, as an officer, you are trained for several things. You're trained to control. There are two completely different worlds. So you can't say because, which by the way, men will tell you, Nigerians are not all generally angry. They are very lovely ones, as a matter of fact. So when you are there in uniform, you are
disagree.
Trained personnel.
I think from my background,
behaving as though you were not trained, isn't that supposed to be unacceptable?
Beg to disagree, Chamberlain. My background as a psychologist. See, you are who you are. Your personality is what your personality is. And the best the training can do for you is to help to sharpen your understanding and they try to make you to understand the ethics of your job. But at the same time, you are thrown back into the same society where you are loaded, you are abused, you are discredited, you are insulted and assaulted. We've seen videos where people deliberately poke policemen. They want them to react. We've seen policemen, being able to comport themselves even in the face of provocation. And we've seen cases where people did not provoke police and police are the one provoking the people. We're still talking about the same society. We cannot, devolve, separate the reality of our society from the agencies, from the people that we have in this various organizations. We can't, because at the end of the day, they are coming back to the same society. They are going to relate with people. They will go to the markets, they will go to the church, they will go to the community centers. They live with people in the same environment, and we expect them to be different. We need to take this, this advocacy back home, down to the family unit, and let's begin to start bringing back those things that we were taught in our days in primary school, in moral instructions on how to behave well in the society. The areas of morality has to be reintroduced. Moral instruction has to be reintroduced into our curriculum in such a way that we can begin to start reshaping. I was so happy when the issue around Gen Z was mentioned. The truth here is that we really don't understand. Many of us, even our leadership, we don't really tend to understand what Gen Z represent. One of the major characteristics of Gen Z is the fact that they don't believe in postponed gratification. They want results now, and they want it now and now. If we don't understand these people, we
can't make sweeping generalization, because clearly several things apply to several people. You can't paint everybody with one brush. But if your submission about officers is that one, many will then say then there's something wrong with the training, because they've seen other officers who conduct themselves very professionally. But I guess it might have to be another conversation for another time as we are winding down. So gentlemen, if you don't mind, let me just get your concluding thoughts. Mr. Bwala, let me get yours in terms of if what we need to do moving forward is not going to be lost on the president particularly.
This will be my plea to the Nigerian people, especially the peaceful protesters. There is no need to go to the street again and protest, because one, the point is made, the message is passed, the message is understood. What we need to do now is to give government
he hasn't told us.
By the federal by
the president hasn't told us.
He doesn't have to speak for the message to be understood, because the president is not deaf and dumb. The message has, and in fact, the president has heard them long before today and began, implementing some of those policies. He has been speaking to various means. So that's one. But if there is a specific request for the president to address the nation, that's a different conversation. But in terms of we want these things to be dealt with, it doesn't have to speak for that thing to be dealt with. My only plea with them is, and the reason I'm asking that they should not have to go to the street, it's just simple. That message, once your message is already passed, there's no point creating a drama, because what is happening is that you are giving the undemocratic element an opportunity for them to continue to make sure that the federal government loses 500 billion. And if you want the federal government to deal with this problem, the federal government needs revenue. It needs the infrastructure to be in place. It needs their critical assets to be in place, and it needs the peace of the state to be able to implement that. So continuing to stay in the street will not help the matter. The message is passed, it is understood.
Yeah. My own position is that, one, I still believe that the president needs to talk to Nigerians on this particular issue. And I expect him to speak to Nigerians. I also believe that some of the major issues raised by the protesters needs to be attended to. Cost of governance is important. The profligacy in government, it has to be stopped so that Nigerians can truly see that we are all in this together. And I also think that Mr. President should look inward. The situation in which some of his own aides come out to just incite Nigerians via their statements, and maybe a sitting president of the Senate would declare that protesters can go on protesting while they will keep eating. I think that is inciting. And I also think that the manner in which the IGP, Kayode Egbetokun, started in his engagement would have been, continued, rather than one we later witnessed, like what happened at Beggar bus stop here, where the Jadinyoju was attacked during the conversation. I think that was needless.
All right, gentlemen, we have to thank all of you for coming on this morning. Ologbondiyan, former National Publicity Secretary of the PDP, Daniel Bwala, a legal practitioner, Professor Osita Ogbu, Professor of Economics at UNN, Enugu, and Mr. Sheyi Adetayo. Thank you also for your perspectives this morning. We're back in a moment on the August protest. It will continue in just a moment.